Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. Not that long ago, we had a federal election, the longest in our Canadian history. In that process, Atlantic Canada voted for the Liberals and made Eastern Canada completely red. Interesting times, because also part of the narrative of the last federal election was the notion of what it means to be Canadian. Surfacing over the 6 weeks was, but this isn't Canadian and this is Canadian. We were working again to recover our national identity in terms of our spirit, our soul, and the policies that would help manifest that. Today's guest is someone who's going to walk us through the beginnings of a brand new process, a process of politics of convergence, into how Canada needs to work together and the province needs to work with the federal government and municipalities need to work with the province in order to meet the challenges that are coming to us on a global scale and on a local scale. Well, hope you enjoy the conversation, because if you can pick up, the attention is on process, different from outcomes. And that's a key shift in the national and provincial and local narrative on the role of politics in community. Today's guest is Matt DeCourcey, recently minted MP for Fredericton-Oromocto. Welcome.
It's great to be back, Dennis.
Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate time.
Well, not at all.
It's at a maximum these days.
Well, it is at a premium, and it's been a really enjoyable 5 months since having the honor to be elected, and certainly had committed to you for some time that I'd like to come back, which is about 2 years on from our last conversation, which I also enjoyed, and that was right about the time I was launching my nomination bid. So hope we have the chance to talk about what those 2 years have looked like and what the next 4 years might look like as well.
And we can explore where we want to explore, but I know a lot of people don't know what it would be like now to be you, or your predecessors, or those to come. So they only get what mainstream media gives them about an MP. But there's so much more that goes to it, from how you even won the nomination to now how hard it was to set up an office, or how long it takes, because I'm sure that the very next day after the federal election, phone was ringing, say, I need this, can you do that? And it might take you a while to get your office up and running.
Well, it's one of the cruel ironies that I or we as MPs are declared elected at 9-10 o'clock on the evening of October 19th, and at 9:01, 10:01 we assume the job. I mean, we are effectively the MP elect for the riding that we represent immediately, with all the responsibility of an MP, with none of the resources to immediately achieve answers and the results that people expect of us. I have to say, people have been tremendously positive and patient and helpful as I, along with my team, have set up the office. And we are just about now finding our rhythm. I mean, we're fully operational, and we are at a stage now where we know where we can go to find answers for people. We know how best to help individuals. We know how best to help groups of people, and we know how to work with our colleagues in Parliament and in government, whether on the political side or on the civil service side, to help affect the type of change that we would like.
Pretty steep learning curve. Even as simple, well, it looks simple from the outside, as setting up the computer system. But there must be what you can get or not get. There must be security elements to it that are pretty intense. So how long would, that one tool, which is a basic tool, how long would it take to put that in place?
Well, the learning curve has certainly been there all the way along, through the nomination, through the campaign, which was a good solid 10, 11 months for me, and then in setting up the office. And you're right. The House of Commons and Parliament is fortunate to have the support of tremendous administrative team that are there to answer our questions and help us set up. But there's a tremendous effort involved in knowing what we are able to purchase and what types of equipment we are allowed to use that meet, you're right, the security protocol and standards required of a parliamentarian or of a federal government representative. I was elected on October 19th. Started to hire staff and a team about a week and a half, 2 weeks later. Secured an office space within those first 2 or 3 weeks. It took us about another month to move into that office space, and then another 2 to 2.5 months, really until the end of January and early into February before we were fully set up. And it was February 15th, celebrating Flag Day, the Maple Leaf flag, that we finally had our official opening and invited people into the office to meet the team and to get a sense of what services we offered. But during that whole transition, I mean, we were dealing with the individual cases that people present to us where they have problems receiving government services. We conducted an ambitious pre-budget consultation tour throughout the riding at the request of the finance minister, who did something similar across the country, and we met with stakeholder groups. We hosted a town hall for students at UNB, for St. Thomas, UNB, NBCC, and Craft College students. And we also hosted a public town hall towards the end of January to provide people an opportunity to express their opinions on what they hope the government's agenda would look like as government prepares the budget.
And so began that bigger conversation right off the get-go. With engaging people, getting feedback, that process kicked in right away.
Well, it did in this official capacity, but truly, Dennis, it started in the nomination, which for me was largely about meeting with people one-on-one, listening to them about their concerns, and then trying to deliver to them perhaps my vision of what I thought this community could contribute to the country, and what values I hope to bring to the job. And then securing the nomination, which was in November of 2014, kind of getting our ducks in a row and starting to knock on doors on January 8th of 2015. And for 10 months, I mean, that's where the conversation really starts, is at the door. And it's all about listening to people, providing a responsive ear. And I have to say, once I got in a groove, I absolutely loved knocking on doors. Loved it. People, as an overwhelming general rule, are kind, they're courteous, they care. Some aren't interested in engaging in conversation, but they're not mean about it. They're actually quite courteous. The very rare exception, you find someone who is off-putting and downright insulting. So it was a tremendous opportunity for me to get to know the riding better. I and my team knocked on 25,000 doors over those 10 and a half months, and we covered the whole riding in many places multiple times. And it's funny, I meet people and they say, I talked to you at the door, and with a very quick kind of mention of where they lived and what time of year it was, I can recall those conversations. They've stuck with me, and it's provided a tremendous base for me to understand what sort of issues and that this community wants championed, and how to go about championing those issues. So we just build upon that conversation now.
And it carries on. This speaks to one of those underlying challenges that we sort of knew you were going to walk into because of your style and approach, and because you're Matt and how you want to do things, which is what you bring to it, is the divisive politics era is done. It's gone. But now we need to get the general public to understand that you are the representative for all of them, and you have to work that other area that people think, well, that we voted red, so this is how it's going to go for 4 years. That method, that process, that dynamic's gone. So it sounds like you're already mapping out a lot of that new dynamic where I'm representing all of you, and I need a conversation with all of you. And to get people past that, and in 4 years from now, go ahead and judge or make a decision if the performance is worthwhile another cycle. So do you have any, for instances, where you've had a an example or a breakthrough, or maybe that comes a year from now when we talk again, where some of the dyed-in-the-wool, different colors, it went, oh, this is what they mean by representative, and
Right.
Matt's here for everybody
Right.
to make the whole area better and to make the province better.
Well, let me maybe just start by explaining a couple of things that I keep front of mind and that I try and express to people to demonstrate that I do want to be the best representative for people in Fredericton. And you know, I mean, what a privilege to have been elected. But I have to remember all the time that there are a lot of people who didn't select me as their choice, and to be humble about that, and to remember that some of the decisions that I will ultimately make will, you know, contravene people's views. I mean, there are people who will disagree with some of the decisions that I have to vote on in Parliament, or some of the ways that I have to do things, and I accept that is part of democracy and that's part of life. But I will do my best through the conversations to make sure that I have the broadest picture possible. There is a tremendous team around me that is able to provide advice and keep listening to people daily that can feed my understanding of things. There are tremendous resources at the community level here, but also in Ottawa as far as research into issues. As a backbench MP, we have this multi-million-dollar research team at our disposal through the Library of Parliament that can provide research like that on any issue that we request. So I do have a way to gather the right information, be around people to ensure that my decisions best reflect the sense of the community. Also, one of the things that I'm keen to remind people, because I often get represented as the Liberal MP for Fredericton, and I say, well, you know what? I'm also the MP for Fredericton, right? And that is an important thing for me to hammer home with people, that I ran under the Liberal banner, I sit in the Liberal caucus, I support the Liberal platform, but I'm the MP for Fredericton, and my job in Parliament is to get up and speak to the needs of constituents who I have the honor of representing.
And that's such an excellent point, because yes, you are a part of this team, and this team had that vision for the country, and then you go try to implement the vision because that's why you won, which is part of the narrative. And another piece of the narrative is, but I also represent all of you, and I'm here to work with and for all of you. So that's a great point. I have a suspicion, in messaging terms, we're probably going to need to say that over and over and over for 2 or 3 years before it sinks in. This is what it looks like. This is how it walks and talks, and this is the benefit for the constituency or for the riding. And maybe that helps shift that cynicism for some people when it comes to politics, thinking it's all rigged and it's party driven, and you're going to have a natural moment, or it's naturally built into the design, where your local area is saying we want this and the national vision is that, and that goes with the turf, and it'll be what it'll be, but people will accept it if they felt they were heard and that homework was done. So that's terrific. I'm hoping that piece continues.
And on that count, the direction that we as Liberals in caucus have received from the Prime Minister is that our primary job is to do the work of representing our constituents. And when we rub up against some things that may be championed from the PMO, maybe championed from different departments, I think we are allowed to express our views on those, and it doesn't have to turn divisive the way any other piece of partisan politics has to turn divisive.
Exactly.
It can be about engaging in a conversation that way, and so when I worry about those sorts of things, the partisanship, the divisiveness, I take my lead from the Prime Minister, who has consistently expressed publicly and behind doors that he wants a team of MPs who are there for the best interests of their constituents, who believe in the values that they bring to the House of Commons, and who are willing to work collaboratively to find solutions and work through those problems in the best interest of all Canadians.
It's awesome, because it reminds me of another era. I'm being old enough to remember the 60s, when Canada would have that sort of national dialogue. And how fascinating in our last election, the one you were in the middle of, the themes that surfaced in the last 2 weeks was about recognizing Canada again, which us of a certain age would be the ones driving that kind of message, because up to then was, I don't recognize Canada anymore. This isn't the process by which we were built from the 60s and early 70s. And what you're rekindling is that conversation. So the millennials, the 20 to 30-year-olds, will need to learn what that conversation is from you, because it was part of how we became one of the top countries in the world for how we engaged ourselves in the rest of the world. Coming up soon, federal budget. You just mapped out a process. Do you have anything you could share about how that process, because media will do its formula and it'll pick on certain things and look for pros and cons,
Sure.
rather than what the balance was or what's the long-term vision.
Right.
You know, so and the main focus on infrastructure spending. You guys will probably handle well the deficit thing, because media wants to pound away at deficits. So infrastructure, timing, how that benefits New Brunswick, your way of seeing it implemented. Do you want to wander into any of that, or is it too soon?
Well, I mean, specifics will certainly come out through the budget, and as has been the tradition, Cabinet has been very lock-lipped about the specifics, and I'm outside of Cabinet presently, so so I don't know those specifics, but I can say I have heard from the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and others that we are going to follow through on the commitments that we made to Canadians in the platform, and so largely it will reflect those commitments. The investment in infrastructure to ensure that in large cities, crumbling infrastructure that hampers people's productivity, that kind of lessens the quality of life, can be refurbished and rebuilt. And we know that spending dollars on good public infrastructure enhances quality of life and health and well-being. And when we have an aging population, we need to ensure that they can retire and live in security. We need to ensure that the people driving the engine of the economy are able to work and be productive. And we need to provide opportunities for young people to grow healthy, you know, in their early years, and then you know, head to post-secondary training and enter the workforce, and that takes public infrastructure. So you will see, I think, the 3 envelopes committed to in the campaign, which are about ensuring that we have proper transit and means to productivity that way, that we invest significantly in green infrastructure, in ensuring that our water and wastewater systems are up to speed and up to code, that we build infrastructure that is resilient against climate change. And then the third piece is our social infrastructure. And that involves investing in early childhood education, investing in proper supports for seniors and those aging, as well as the type of cultural and recreational I guess, centers and opportunities that people move into communities to take advantage of.
Yes.
And in Fredericton, I mean, in Fredericton, we have this wonderful burgeoning artistic and cultural scene that's represented through some of the festivals and events that go on. We have this lovely Beaverbrook Art Gallery. We have the Charlotte Street Art Center. We've got a real underground music scene that is hip and cool, and we've got this craft college that I had the pleasure of going through just the other day, that really, I think if you put an economic piece on it, contributes a lot to New Brunswick. So there is a lot that we can benefit from here in our province, and my caucus colleagues in New Brunswick, along with the provincial government, along with municipal governments and community organizations, are working diligently to identify opportunities so that when the investment is made, those entities can apply for funding and we can put people to work rebuilding our infrastructure.
That was one of the stories on not such a positive note from previous administration federally, where there was announcements for infrastructure spending, but media never followed up on how difficult it was for municipalities to apply for the darn thing, because the window is so narrow. And there's no way a municipality in a 3 or 4 month window is going to get tenders in time, pick the right tender to then use that through the application process. So it will be quite exciting for municipalities and provinces to be able to get at their wastewater management issues, and to preserve that for everyone. And the sacredness of water too, it's got to wheel its way in.
And I think that speaks to reestablishing partnerships that work.
Yes.
For communities, right?
It's about getting things done.
You know, I think the infrastructure minister has heard loud and clear that we need to build flexibility into these programs because the challenges in Toronto are starkly different from the challenges in Fredericton, which are starkly different from the challenges in Iqaluit, and in rural centres in the north, which have a whole other range of infrastructure challenges that we cannot forget about.
Yeah, First Nations issues around water are phenomenal and need to become a priority because it'll help our nation's soul, basically. As you get through all of this stuff, does food ever come up? Food sovereignty, food security?
Both the conversation around food security and ensuring that we can support local growers and healthy food, as well as the food insecurity conversation around making sure that families and people from perhaps more vulnerable situations have access to those sorts of things. In Fredericton, you've got a place like Greener Village, which is doing tremendous work.
And the Community Food Smart program, and there's a lot going on. It's quite organic, not to use a pun, right? But because change is gonna pop up at the grassroots level. But if it can be harnessed and catalyzed or encouraged, especially from your position. New Brunswick imports 92% of its food and grows 8% of its own. So how does the province become self-sustaining in food supply? It's something that comes up through almost all of the conversations I have on this program. That food security comes up, and I know it's somewhere on your radar.
Well, it is. It gets linked into conversations that I'm having, and so I have a lot of getting up to speed on that issue still to do. But there are wonderful people in this community, like yourself and others, who I know when I need the information I need or the proper, I guess, support in advancing an issue, I can find and seek out, and I mean that's not just for this issue, but for any issue. That's the trick of being a good representative, is knowing where the expertise is.
It's somewhat related, but maybe a shift in direction with conversation. Do you have a sense of New Brunswick's scale now on a national scale through this political process you've been exposed to for 6 months? Because when I hear you talk, the traditional approach is your MP will go fight for you in Ottawa in order to bring money back to the area. And it'd be nice if the word fight wasn't the word, that it was a strategy, but with that comes the scale issue though. So the impact of $1 million in New Brunswick, like that Atlantic Lottery ad that someone won $1 million, they moved to Toronto and they bought a condo that was about 800 square feet with a balcony. $1 million goes a lot further in the Maritimes. So the greatest impact of the dollars in a smaller region that needs its development done because it doesn't have it. I'm thinking there must be something to that rather than you're competing against Toronto or competing against Ontario or Quebec. Can you walk us through what that might be like? Because you could have a big impact in a small place because of your access point.
Yeah, if I can, just first addressing the phrasing around fighting for a region, and I've been loath to use that term from the very beginning. I mean, I'm not a fighter. I would much rather build the type of partnerships I need with people to advance a project or advance an issue for an individual or group, and I found that to be a much better way of working for me. And so an exercise that the Prime Minister asked us all to consider early on is, you know, when thinking about what your community needs, I want you to take a step back and I want you to listen to your colleagues and I want you to listen to what they think their community needs and how that benefit in their community can have, you know, a tangible effect on helping your community. And so that has helped me, from a provincial perspective, kind of develop a cohesive way of working with my colleagues, right? So we need to be looking out for each other's regions and making sure that we are all benefiting. And I think, I think we are in an advantageous point right now. I mean, partisan familiarity does aid when you have four premiers who are working together in an Atlantic region with a prime minister who they are familiar with, to ensure that, sure, the scale of some of the things we need is different than in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, but people have a right to live in this region of the country, and a right to live and work and raise their children well. And I think you see 4 provinces within a region willing to work together to achieve best outcomes for each, and then represent that cohesively to the federal government. And you have federal government representatives who are excited to work with the provinces. You know, and I have a tremendous relationship with the province, with the community councils in New Maryland, Fredericton, and Oromocto, mostly because they've been willing to open up to me and ask for the partnership themselves. And so if we can work together and then bring in community leaders and community organizations from elsewhere, I think we can receive the types of investments from the federal government that we need to do well.
What you're speaking to is scale, because you're able to integrate on a conversation and a process basis. You can shift the scale a little bit. Politics of cooperation instead of politics of conflict. It's a major shift, and I wanted to make sure the point was made. It's a different style.
Yeah.
When you talk about that on a regional level too, another thought that comes to mind is recycling and solid waste management, because some people in some areas don't get to recycle glass in the province, and a variety of other things, but they see through media all these other places that can do that, and their hearts are there and they want to participate. But it's one of those infrastructure things, and it's one of those scale things. So it may be possible through infrastructure spending and cooperation at the political level that New Brunswick could have a burgeoning industry, because according to one of the past guests, Pat McCarthy at Recycle MB, that we have an opportunity in the next 5, 7, 10 years to create long-term staple jobs, and they're clean jobs, if we can get our act together. So your leadership in that area might be quite interesting along with the other MPs.
Right.
Has that surfaced yet?
Oh, well, I've heard these sorts of things at the door. Of course, people ask, about, recycling opportunities and waste, things that go to waste here that may not elsewhere. And my sense is largely it's about capacity at the very local level to deal with those. So if the local level says we want to make this a priority and we want to work with our provincial and federal governments to seek their investments when we put the plan together, I think that's the way to advance these sorts of things. And
so that's what you need. You need that local level to kind of get its act together to a certain point. And then they can come to you and say, we got this far, can you help us get this?
Sure, and we're here to help identify the opportunities and work as active partners. But there are models elsewhere that we can borrow, and you're right. I think being environmentally conscious about how we operate is important. It's been a leading point from the federal government and from the Prime Minister, and there will certainly be challenges, along that route. But working with provinces and municipalities, I'm sure we can do a better job by these things.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. This is a good pause moment.
Sure.
If that's all right. We're talking today with Matt DeCourcey, MP for Fredericton-Oromocto, and we'll be right back.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son. Between what once was and what's begun. A mile marker.
We're talking today with MP Matt DeCourcey from Fredericton-Oromocto, a newly minted MP, and he's walking us through what the first 5-6 months are like, as well as some of the key issues that are already starting to find their way to him. So thanks again for being on the show.
Like I say, great to be here.
So we were talking about infrastructure spending, vision for the country, but also talking about a process with engagement of everyone, and maybe getting into politics of convergence rather than politics of conflict.
Sure.
And we will repeat that over and over, not just this show, but other places, so that people start to learn we need to build together again. Any highlights the first 5 months? I know it's been a blur and there's been a lot, but somewhere in there something might have gone pop and went, this is why I'm doing this.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of stories I would love to share. Maybe Well, I want to speak first of all about the opportunity I had to rise for the first time in the House of Commons, because that was really the fulfillment of what has been, a lifelong dream. I had the tremendous privilege to ask the very first question of the government in the debate on the speech from the throne. How that happened was my colleague Rémi Massé from the Gaspésie area, from Rivière-du-Loup and that peninsula, was asked by the whip's office, on recommendation from the Prime Minister, to deliver the first speech in reply from the speech from the throne. So he's a new MP as well, and that's the tradition. So he gets to stand and deliver a 20-minute speech to a full House of Commons right after the speech from the throne. They allowed him to ask a colleague on his own to rise and ask the first question in reply to his speech. So he gives his 20-minute speech, and then the convention is the speaker rises and recognizes someone from the official opposition, and there's a question and answer. Someone from the third party, there's a question and answer. And then I get to stand and rise, and not many MPs have the opportunity to deliver their first words in the House of Commons to a packed audience the way I did. And
were you okay? Were you breathing?
Oh, Dennis, I prepared all night. I said, well, this might be a question, but I'm milking this into a 2-minute statement about how proud I am of Fredericton and what we have to contribute. And I was ready, and honestly, when I stood, I knew exactly what I was doing. I felt confident, I felt great, and my gosh, what a thrill that was. Since then, I've had the chance to deliver about 5 speeches myself, and I stand and take part in debate on a regular basis. And it is at the same time a tremendously humbling and privileged opportunity to stand in that place and look around and think about where I am.
Yes.
As well as the most incredibly normal and human and regular experience that you could imagine. Because we walk into the House of Commons, which is that humbling, privileged piece.
Yes.
And we stand and we speak about what we would like to speak about, and there's a couple people over in the corner who are chatting away about whatever they're talking about, and 3 guys from the opposition who are in complete disagreement with what I have to say, and someone else checking the message on their phone. I mean, it's like standing and speaking in any other context. It's quite normal, but that feeling of the tremendous privilege and honor associated with being in Parliament and the House of Commons has yet to dissipate. And I'm told from people who have been there 10, 15, 20 years that never ceases to exist.
And wonderful words about the privilege of it, because media will dominate our narrative, and most people will perceive behavior in the House of Commons as not necessarily how you just described it, which is really nice to hear, because it'll build the respect and the trust to the process as people, willingly show. But it was just so amazing to be in that spot, and also recognizing everything that came before you and what will come after. That's powerful.
Yeah. So that's been that was probably the most memorable experiences so far in Ottawa. And there have been other times where I stand there and think, wow, here I am in this House of Commons, and I'm a part of this. And so that I never lose. The greatest, I guess, sense of responsibility and in a privilege in a different sense that I felt, and where I felt, okay, this is what I want to be a part of. This is why I'm doing this. Was being at the airport in December as the first family of Syrian refugees arrived. Our regional minister Dominic LeBlanc was there. The premier was there. Elena Lockhart from the Sussex area and myself were all there to help receive this first family. And I will never forget the look on the young boys' faces as they came through into the terminal. And the young guy who is 12 years old, who I have since had the opportunity to see again down at the Cultural Center in Fredericton, said to us all, he says, I'm going to grow up to be a bone doctor, right? An orthopedic surgeon. And when you think about the potential that we have with these young people coming into our community, to add to our diversity and our vibrancy and grow up and go to school at our universities,
Yep.
and take on these types of professions in our community. I just think what a tremendous opportunity we have, and what a tremendous privilege to be a part of welcoming these people to our community. And I have no doubt that they are going to make our community better.
That taps into a theme. Well, if we play in it a little bit, then we can let it go, because it'll come more 2 years from now, I suspect. But Canada's long history of immigration and how to integrate that, its multicultural mosaic culture from the 60s again. Are we a melting pot, or are we a mosaic? That old discussion from Canadian history. With the Syrian refugees now coming to Canada, it invites that conversation again about how do we hold Canada together as a whole, while integrating more and more people coming into our communities, into our provinces, and carrying capacity, adding their talents and heart and all that stuff. But at the same time, we have to get past some of those obstacles that have been placed for second language training, getting proper documentation, the community's capacity to absorb it, because we've shoved so much over the past 30 years back into the voluntary sector, trying to cope with it. So karma-wise and heartfelt-wise, there's no question it's the right thing to do. The implementation element is where sometimes people get a little frazzled. It really disheartens me to read comments some places where some people feel some resources are being taken away from them and being given to someone else who wasn't even born here, and they sort of miss the bigger picture. So is there an implementation element to it for you as well? Do you get to oversee this? So the first 25,000 are almost here, more will come, but as we build that new system to bring them in here, there's got to be a responsibility to 2 years from now, 4 years from now. How is it going?
It is clearly an all of Canada project. This doesn't happen simply with the federal government. It doesn't happen with just the provincial government. It doesn't happen with municipalities or just community organizations. It happens with everybody on board. And it has been tremendous to see the response from people, specifically in our community, who, Dennis, that has punched above its weight in the way it has stepped up to meet the demand here. There are sensitivities that we have to be aware to. There are tremendous challenges with all this, and we need to be we're cognizant of the fact that this is not easy to do, and we have to be diligent every day and responsive to the health concerns, to the integration concerns, to the respect for the rights of people who are coming and the diversity that they need to have offered to them as well. I can tell you I've been seized with this on a daily basis, in constant communication with my colleagues in the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, in communication with the Department of Post-Secondary Training and Labour and the Premier's office here provincially, with Municipal Council, with the Multicultural Association, who have been absolutely tremendous in the way they have stepped up to the plate here. They are the experts on the ground, and they are the ones that I take my lead from in knowing how best to message this publicly, and how best that our office can support it. And the way that volunteers have stepped up in Fredericton needs to be recognized, and you can rest assured that we will be recognizing people for what they have contributed. So at a local level, I'm tremendously proud of Fredericton, and Ottawa knows how large a role Fredericton has played in this. At a national level, there is a lot that we need to do as a country to ensure that we are that welcoming, inclusive, and respectfully diverse country. We have a job to do in reconciliation with our Indigenous persons here in the country.
It might be the single largest issue in terms of who we are and who we're going to become.
That's right. So we need to be so aware of the reconciliation and the partnership that needs to take place with First Nations, Métis, and Aboriginals across the country. At the same time, understanding the needs in communities of people who have long been in this country as well, who settled here in other areas, and be ready to welcome new immigrants, newcomers, refugees, that again, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm convinced are going to add so much to our country.
And if the world's population is going to double by 2047, 2050, and if we have 1/3 the world's freshwater supply, and we have a certain land mass, and if we accept global change, climate change is actually happening, then the place to go is Canada. So the more we can nurture our processes of how we come together as a people, but a diverse people with this sort of vision.
There's nobody better place to do this than us, Dennis.
And it really demands a politics of convergence rather than divisive politics. It's a whole other feeling inside.
The very best of what Canada is and what Canada can be is about meeting this challenge. And I'm ready to help lead that and support it when others are leading it, and I take my cues from others who I have the privilege of sitting and standing and talking with in Ottawa all the time, who are ready to take on this challenge and do the best we can for people.
Yep. We have about 6 minutes left. If you're willing to wander into something a touch more specific, some economy stuff, and we'll cut it after 2-3 minutes and then do a wrap of some kind. The Trans-Pacific Partnership got some momentum in the media, second or third to last week of the campaign in the States as well as in Canada, the last election. There's an Atlantic Accord, if I've got the title right, but there's a trade agreement in the works going over with Europe and Canada. Again, the media tend to make it divisive. Here's the winners, here's the losers, rather than here's the vision and here's how everyone fits.
Yeah.
Is that on your radar at all, or has it been too soon? It's been 5 months. I know that the TPP thing and the ability to export goods to Asian markets would tie to fisheries and forestry for us. Do you have anything there? If not, that's fine because it's too soon. It'll surface a year from now.
I think I'm getting more and more up to speed on the specifics involved in the deal. The commitment that the government has made is to ensure an open debate in the House of Commons. So what gets reported on is that we've signed this, we've signed that, we've signed this, we've signed that. Right. What we have done is allowed that process that is going on right now, this process that's going on in all the different countries involved, to continue so that we can have the type of conversation that we want in country here, but also so that if there are modifications that need to be made, we can have those discussions with our partners around the world. It's a complex, thing. It's a complex deal, and so to narrow it down into winner A, loser B, I think is far too simplistic. Yes. Certainly people come to this conversation with different philosophical views, and again, this is a very good example of how you need to be humble about the different ways that people view issues, and also empathetic to the way that this, as can any other decision government makes, can have effects on people, whether positive or negative, but specifically where someone may have some sort of negative effect occur because of something, we need to understand that and be empathetic to it, and at least try to find ways to mitigate those things.
Yep. In always the way, because we're in for a period of change. The next 20 years, it's a period of change, whether you like it or not, or the political change or economic change. Things are shifting. So to have a direction and a vision and communicate that for people, and this is where we're going to go, and where they all fit in, you can still maintain the whole while shifting into a new direction. I know there's some people who will say the TPP would be one of the best things possible for New Brunswick, but back to the issue of scale, we're so small percentage-wise that small changes over there have huge changes for us. So the saving grace is going to be a better political engagement process.
Absolutely, and that's what we have to hold ourselves to, is that engagement process.
Yeah. Couple minutes left. Highlights, because we're kind of planting seeds for the next time, if it's a year from now, and take a little pause and see how did the year go. What do you see in the coming year? What's your ideal vision of New Brunswick getting a bump up? Because the math is always negative about New Brunswick, literacy levels, aging population, blah, 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 blah. And it's doesn't seem to reflect what people are saying in coffee shops and in schoolyards and schools. There's a lot of good stuff happening here.
I think deep down, people from New Brunswick love New Brunswick. They want New Brunswick to succeed, and it's our job to ensure that our decisions help reflect that. Certainly there have been some challenges and some challenging decisions that have had to have been made, both to perhaps rein in some of the deficit challenges here locally, but also just in the way that services are administered. I think we have a duty to help support decisions made at local and provincial levels. We have a duty to work with other elected officials and governments and community organizations to better listen to people and ensure as well that they are informed about the reality of why decisions are made. I mean, sometimes we don't do a good enough job of educating people to the actual reality of the situation. Largely, I think New Brunswick has a lot to offer to Canada. We have beautiful green space, we have beautiful access to water, we have industrious, hardworking people, we have some of the best, and I don't mind being a little bit subjective in this measure, we have some of the best post-secondary institutions in our country. We have the most entrepreneurial university in the country. We have a school in Sackville that is consistently ranked near the very top of the post-secondary undergrad scale. We have my alma mater, St. Thomas University, which continues to provide leadership in liberal arts and human rights and graduating our social workers and teachers and our lawyers. We have a tremendous amount to offer. And what we talked about, the convergence, the collaboration, the listening, the conversation is, I think, how we present ourselves as a collective voice on the national scale. Not to fight against other regions, but to say, hey, wait a minute, other regions, there's something that we can help contribute here as well. On a personal level, over the next year, I still have a lot of learning to do. We talk about, you mentioned a number of times about people needing to hear about politics of collaboration and conversion and learn that over the next years. I have a heck of a lot to learn myself about the way to effect change through committee, through the House, through advocating on behalf of constituents to my colleagues, and I've already had moments where I've had to step back and say, I may have been able to do that better had I known about this or that, or I've learned through different things I've done already, and nothing has been disastrous. So I'm fortunate to learn the way I've learned, but I want to get in a habit of having quarterly community forums, town halls, and so I'm working on another one here for later in April. I want to continue to have people think and know that they can connect with our office when I'm not available and meet with my team, who I will place a lot of trust and faith in to do the good work. And then when I am available, I want them to know that they can find me and we can advance issues around research and development in our universities, issues around positive, healthy aging and the right type of healthcare supports, which was a commitment from our government, and supports for that base gauge town, our military families, our veterans who have served Canada and who we have a duty to look out for. I think in a more proactive way, and I like the tone set in Ottawa right now towards that. But when you've got that type of asset in your community, you need to ensure that those people are looked out for.
It almost sounds like the forging of an identity for New Brunswick different from the drive-through province.
That's right. No, the stay and visit and
a friend of mine,
enjoy it.
A friend of mine calls it the Shire from Lord of the Rings.
So I mean, here's something else neat that's going on in New Brunswick right now is this explosion in the craft beer industry.
Yes, isn't it fascinating?
And you want to talk about collaboration and conversion and working together. These business people, they're working together to advance this industry and there's an economic benefit to it. I think there's a tourism benefit to it. There's a community feel to these groups, the way they give back to the community. What a great model to use to help advance in other areas.
When we think of Germany, some people think of beer, right? So it's an identifier for their culture. When we think of France, we think of food. And a previous guest on the show talked about New Brunswick's identities should be connected to food and craft beer that way. We're done.
All right.
Any last little 10-second, 20-second blip you'd like to offer, just to give you the space?
Look, it's been a tremendous experience so far, and I remain energized and optimistic about what Fredericton and the greater Fredericton area and the province can achieve. There's no short-circuiting things. It's going to take hard work, and it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take patience from people, but we remain optimistic, we listen to people, and we work hard and achieve, hopefully, some positive results.
Again, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate what your days are like these days. And thank you for taking the time. As always, be good, have fun, and love each other.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son.